If you're hooked by tales of mystery, redemption, and the untold stories of the frontier, hit that like button and subscribe for more. This journey's just beginning, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. The town of Red Ridge had always been quiet, a place where everyone knew everyone else, and secrets only whispered between the cracks of the prairie wind. But when Clara Jenkins arrived at the auction, something about the atmosphere felt different, heavy, as though the land itself was holding its breath. A cloud of dust hung over the square, the sun casting an unforgiving light across the hard faces of ranchers, merchants, and the occasional wanderer who stumbled through town. Clara, in her faded calico dress and worn boots, was no different from any of the other ranchers, save for the desperate edge in her eyes. The auctioneer stood at the podium, his gravelly voice announcing the sale of livestock, land, and, to Clara's surprise, a man. She hadn't planned on purchasing anyone, but there he stood, Rhett Donovan. The name alone stirred a ripple of whispers across the crowd. He was a man with a reputation, a cowboy of no fixed home, known for his wild ways, for being both feared and admired in equal measure. And yet here he was, chained at the wrists like an animal, as the auctioneer detailed his many skills and the infamous deeds that had gotten him to this point. The crowd watched, some eager to see how much money would be thrown into the pot, others simply curious. Clara's heart raced in her chest. She hadn't meant to, but her hand was already raised before she could stop it, a desperate bid to secure whatever might be left of her family's ranch, and perhaps, in the process, secure the piece of the land that had been slipping from her grasp. She didn't expect to win, but when the auctioneer's hammer came down with a sharp crack, she found herself staring at the man she had just bought. Rhett Donovan was now hers, for better or worse. As he was led to her side, his dark eyes met hers, unreadable and intense, a flicker of something like recognition in them. He didn't speak, didn't move except for a slight tilt of his head, almost as if to ask, "What now?" But Clara wasn't sure she had an answer. She only knew that with the auction behind her, the real game was just beginning. Something about this man, about his haunted gaze and the tattoos on his forearm that peeked out from under his sleeves, told her that there was more to him than met the eye. And somehow, she had just bought her way into something far darker than she had ever imagined. The days following the auction were a blur of nervous tension and hard decisions. Clara's ranch was barely more than a patch of arid land now, the fences long rotted, the barn in desperate need of repair. Yet, somehow, she knew it would take more than just fixing the place up to make it livable again. It would take someone stronger than the land itself to wrestle back control. And that's where Rhett Donovan came in. From the moment he stepped into her life, he was a force of nature. His presence loomed over the small house like a storm cloud waiting to burst, but Clara couldn't bring herself to regret the decision. He was silent, almost too silent, as they worked together. He mended fences with a quiet precision, moved the cattle with an ease that suggested a deep, almost effortless understanding of the land, while she cleaned the old house, sorted the remains of the farm's dwindling supplies, and tried to make sense of the life she had suddenly found herself leading. But it was the nights that were the hardest. Clara found herself lying awake in the small bed in the corner of the room, her thoughts turning restless as she listened to the strange sounds that came from the barn, the rhythmic thud of boots on the hard earth, the snorts and neighs of the horses, and something else, something like the sound of scraping. She couldn't explain it, but it was as though Rhett was hiding something from her. There were moments when he would disappear into the barn at dusk, his back rigid, his face drawn tight, with some inner battle that Clara couldn't understand. It was on one of those nights that Clara finally decided to confront him. She had no reason to suspect anything, yet her instincts, honed by years of working the land alone, told her that there was something darker buried under the surface of this man's stoic exterior. The tattoos on his forearm, the ones that twisted like dark vines around his skin, caught her eye more often now. They seemed to pulse in the firelight, as if alive. Clara had seen similar markings on old ranch hands, but they had never looked like that, so intricately detailed, so deliberate. It was the mark of something older, something much more dangerous than she had first imagined. When Clara approached him that evening, his expression was unreadable. He hadn't expected her. He never expected anyone. But she pressed on, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "What's with the tattoos, Rhett?" she asked, her tone as casual as she could muster. His eyes flickered, the briefest moment of hesitation before he answered. It's just ink. Doesn't mean much. But Clara knew better. She knew that the men of the frontier didn't get tattoos unless they had lived through something. Something big. She took a step closer, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the faded designs. Then why won't you talk about it? She pressed, crossing her arms over her chest. For a moment, he didn't answer. The silence between them grew heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken things. Finally, he looked at her, his expression hard but not unkind. Because some things are better left buried, he muttered, his voice rough, as though the words themselves were painful to speak. Clara took a deep breath, willing herself not to back down. You can bury whatever you want, Rhett, but you're on my land now, and you'll tell me what's really going on, or I'll make you. The challenge hung in the air, sharp and bitter, but it was then that something changed. Rhett's face softened, just the smallest bit, and for a fleeting moment, Clara could have sworn she saw a shadow of vulnerability in his eyes. But that was enough. It's not something you want to know, Clara, he said quietly. His voice had lost its edge, and in that instant, Clara realized the truth. Whatever haunted him, whatever past he was running from, it had already claimed him. And now, it was coming for her, too. The tattoo, she understood now, wasn't just ink. It was a mark of something dangerous, something tied to his past, to his very soul. She had bought into this life, and with it came more than just hard work. It came with a past that wouldn't stay buried, and it would tear her world apart if she wasn't careful. Rhett's past was no longer just his own. It was a dark cloud hanging over them both, and it was only a matter of time before it burst. As the days grew colder, Clara could feel the tension between them slowly shift from the unspoken into something tangible, something that settled deep in her chest and kept her awake at night. Rhett's silence was no longer just the absence of words. It was the weight of 1,000 unasked questions, and Clara began to feel the gnawing certainty that he was hiding something far darker than she could have ever imagined. It was in the way his eyes darted to the horizon whenever a storm approached, in the way his muscles tightened at the mention of certain places, the old church in town, the neighboring ranch, or the cliffs overlooking the valley. There was a past there, hidden beneath his rugged exterior, and Clara could feel it pressing in on her from all sides. Yet despite it all, she couldn't bring herself to turn him away. He was a man broken by something more than just the land. He had suffered, fought, and survived in a way she could never fully understand. And still he worked. He worked harder than any man she'd ever known, as though he was trying to outrun whatever darkness haunted him. It wasn't until the first snowstorm hit that things truly began to unravel. The wind howled across the plains, carrying with it the biting chill of winter's wrath. The cattle had to be moved, the fences checked, and the barn sealed tight against the storm. Rhett was already out in the fields before the sun had fully risen, his dark silhouette moving like a shadow against the white expanse. Clara stayed inside, working on the old ledger of the ranch, trying to calculate the losses from the year before. But her mind kept drifting back to him. Rhett, with his quiet intensity, his haunted gaze, and the tattoos on his forearm that seemed to hold secrets she wasn't sure she was ready to uncover. She had to know. It was no longer a matter of curiosity. It was a matter of survival. By the time the storm reached its peak, Clara could hear the sounds of the horses from the barn, panic in their hoofs, the frantic snorts of the animals as they felt the pressure of the storm closing in. She had to act fast. The wind screamed outside, rattling the windows of the old house. Clara threw on her thick wool coat and headed for the barn, her heart pounding in her chest. As she stepped into the barn, the familiar smell of hay and leather filled her nostrils. But it was the sight of Rhett that stopped her in her tracks. He was standing by the corral, his back to her, staring at the horizon through the storm. His posture was rigid, tense. The moment he turned around, Clara could see it. There, under his sleeve, the tattoo that had once seemed like a mere curiosity now felt like a brand, a mark of something that didn't belong on this land. She had to know what it meant. She had to confront him. Rhett, Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. I need to know what's going on. What are you hiding? He didn't answer at first. Instead, he took a deep breath, his eyes searching the swirling snowflakes as if trying to find the right words. Then, he turned to face her, and for the first time, Clara saw a flicker of emotion, regret. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried with it the weight of years of guilt. I never wanted this for you, Clara, he said. I thought I could bury it, leave it behind. But it's coming for us now. It always does. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Coming for us? The words hung in the air, thick and oppressive. Before she could respond, Rhett reached for his sleeve, pulling it up to reveal the full extent of the tattoo, a symbol she had seen before on the men who ran the black market cattle trade, the ones who trafficked in the most dangerous secrets of the frontier. But there was more to it, something older in the design, something that tied him not just to the land, but to a criminal underworld that no one spoke of openly. They were my father's men, Rhett confessed, his voice raw with emotion. And now they're looking for me. They'll come for you, too, Clara. They always find a way to make things worse. Clara stepped back, the weight of his words sinking into her like a stone. His father's men. That was it. The past that Rhett had tried to outrun had finally caught up with them. There was no escaping it now. The storm outside, the howling winds, the darkness settling in, they were all warnings. The men who had once controlled Rhett's fate, the ones whose mark he wore, were closing in. But Clara wasn't ready to run. Not this time. We fight, she said, her voice resolute. I didn't buy you to let you slip away. I bought you to fight. Whatever comes, we face it together. I won't back down. Rhett's eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw the faintest hint of a smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to tell Clara that she hadn't lost him to the past. Not yet. And as the storm raged on outside, as the snow continued to pile high against the barn doors, Clara made a decision. She would protect the life they had built, no matter the cost. The past had a way of coming back, but so did the people who were willing to fight for their future. And together, they would fight,